Jessica Blaylock was born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida, spent some time at sports radio station 1010XL before being promoted to the big leagues as Fox Sports sideline reporter for both the Miami Marlins and the Florida Panthers. That's right, the NHL and MLB. So this girl knows her hustle. In collaboration with Void magazine, I interviewed Jessica along with other women in sports media who have Jacksonville ties for a story dubbed Females Talking Routes and Getting Paid to Do It. Yes, that's a play off Panthers quarterback Cam Newton's infamous comments back in 2017 about women working in sports media. So we felt like we wanted to tell the other side of the story. You can catch this full editorial, which debuts in Void's September sports issue, with bonus video and podcast interviews that we used for the story itself. Jessica was the first woman in sports broadcasting that I ever worked with, and honestly, she's a big inspiration to me both personally and professionally. She spearheaded getting the first football show in the country hosted by all women in helmets and heels, which I'm still a co-host for, to come to life at 1010XL, and I've wanted to chat with her ever since she got this big promotion to the NHL and the MLB. In this interview, Jessica will detail her life growing up as a sports fan, getting involved in sports media, and the challenges she faces in the ever-evolving industry. Welcome in, guys. This is the final interview of the day for Void Magazine's sports issue, dropping on September 1st. And last but not least, we have Jessica Blaylock, born and raised in Jacksonville, I believe, and now covering sports in South Florida. So she's just a little bit further south, still in the same state. So Jessica, I mean, obviously for a lot of local Jacksonville people, they know you, they know how you got first involved in the industry. But for those who don't know, how did you first get involved with sports?
They're going to know Lemon and Chester by the end of this interview too, because they're probably going to be barking their faces off the whole time. But yeah, just kind of how I got involved in sports. I realized in middle school that I wanted to be a reporter. I feel very lucky that I knew kind of from a young age what I wanted to do with my life. Took a journalism class in middle school and just kind of fell in love with it. And then in high school, actually, when I was 17, I just became enamored with the Gator basketball team that went to the championship game and lost, unfortunately, to Michigan State. But I just remember thinking to myself, it would be so much fun to cover this team or any other sports team. And that's kind of when I decided I wanted to not just be a journalist, but a sports journalist. And, you know, I always mention my dad because my dad has 3 girls, no boys, but that didn't stop him from passing his love of sports on to us. And there was just always sports on from as early as I can remember, whether it was baseball, whether it was football, whether it was college basketball, whatever the case may be. And then, of course, when the Jaguars came along, you know, the Jags were a beloved team in our household. So I think the combination of having a father who is obsessed with sports and has passed on his love of sports to his kids, and just, you know, knowing early on what I wanted to do, it was kind of the perfect combination.
Do you have that kind of first memory where you vividly remember like watching sports or participating in a sporting activity with your dad?
Yeah, I remember the Jaguars came about when I was in middle school, and I think it was in 8th grade. I remember just sitting down and watching some NFL games. And I mean, it definitely took a little bit later on in life to truly appreciate his passion for sports and really kind of latch on. But that's probably the earliest memory of really sharing in a sporting experience. And then my dad was born and raised right outside of Boston. So when the Sox went to the ALCS in 2003 and lost to the Yankees on the Aaron Boone walk-off home run, and then 2004 when they actually made it to the World Series and swept the Cardinals, you know, he and I would call each other after every single game. It just kind of became, you know, we have to do this. Like the Red Sox won because we called each other after the game, and they won again because we called each other after the game. So it just kind of became something fun. But yeah, so I think all in all, that's a big part of it. And then like everyone, I have a very unique path to the place that I'm at today. I think that's something that's so cool in this industry. Nobody really has the same journey. Nobody really goes down the same path. Everyone's got a very unique story as to how they got where they are. And I think same thing for me, you know, whether it was working behind the scenes for ESPN straight out of college, and then getting the opportunity with Fox Sports Florida, crossing paths again with Frank Frangie and the 1010XL crew and becoming a part of that family, and then eventually making this move down here to South Florida and covering baseball and hockey, two sports that I never would have imagined early on covering, but they've been an absolute blast to be a part of.
Now, how did you work for 1010 before or in college, or how did, like, covering the Jags first, or did you work, at UF? Like, where does it sort of, I guess, start for you professionally?
So it's so funny. And I know Frank and I have told this story quite a bit on the radio. How I got to know Frank initially was I babysat his daughter, Amber.
Oh, wow.
And then when I went to University of Florida and declared journalism as my major, when I was looking to do my internships, Frank let me do my radio internship with him. And it was Frank and Beef. Beef was producing at the time. And so I did my radio internship with Frank. And then it wasn't until several years after college, I was actually already working on camera for Fox Sports Florida. And it was Christmas Day, and Frank and his wife, Suzanne, were watching the high school football state finals. And I was sideline reporting for those. I think it was a replay of them. And Suzanne looked to Frank and said, you know, you've been thinking about wanting to have a woman on your show. Why not reach out to Jessica? And it just kind of worked out perfectly because we already had previous history together. And I love Frank. I love Suzanne. And it just was a great opportunity for me. So that's kind of how I became part of 1010XL. But I was actually doing television before I did radio. But
the magic,
in the long run, doing radio made me so much better on television.
So yeah, I've heard that. It's usually I guess the traditional path is, you know, people start off as in writing, and then they go to radio, and then they move into TV.
Right.
And you can't really go backwards in a sense. You can't really go into TV first and then not be a writer.
All over the place. That's what's so great. I think about that a lot, just how lucky I've been, not only in the sense that I've had the opportunity to cover all four major sports in some capacity. You know, television, I've done hockey, baseball, and the NBA. And for, you know, the NFL, I got to cover that through working for the radio station. So, you know, not only have I had the opportunity to cover the big four sports, but I've had the opportunity to do television, to do radio, to work behind the scenes when I worked for ESPN, to write blog posts for the radio station. So yeah, it's been an awesome journey, and definitely one that I don't take a single day for granted.
And you were instrumental in getting the first football show in the country hosted by all women to get started up on 1010 with Helmets and Heels. What did it sort of feel like to see that fruition, or that plan come to fruition?
Well, I think that we definitely have to give a shout out to Steve.
Yeah.
Because he was a huge part, Steve Griffin, our general manager at 1010XL, he was a huge part of bringing that all together. And, you know, not only having the vision for an all-female sports show, but believing in us to be able to do it, and really, you know, backing our abilities and being all for giving us the opportunity to do that. So I think it was really cool because, you know, you don't think a lot about whether it's a TV show or a radio show being anchored by all women, but to have that opportunity was so awesome. And, you know, I think up to that point, I had covered the Jaguars for 4+ seasons, maybe about to embark on my 5th year covering them. And so it was really cool to be able to take the knowledge that we had all gained of covering football and spending time in the locker room and talking to coaches and talking to players, and the fact that we all still wanted to continue learning about the sport ourselves, whether that was X's and O's or whether that was the personal side of it, and being able to just all come together, have so many people who believed in us, have so many people, not only from the radio station, but from the Jaguars who were on board with the vision. It was awesome. Awesome to be a part of, and awesome to, like you mentioned, see it come to fruition and really take off.
Now, I think it was a few months after the show debuted that you got the opportunity to go down to South Florida to start covering the Marlins. So how much of a transition as far as like intricacies between the major sports? How was that a difficult transition for you, or how do you sort of manage, I guess, the different sort of cultural backgrounds between all the sports?
Well, I think with anything, there's always a learning curve. You know, even if you watched it your whole life. I mean, when I started covering the NFL, just because I'd watched football for years, there was still a lot to learn. There was still a lot of X's and O's stuff to really submerge myself in. There was learning how to navigate my way around the locker room and really be comfortable, how to ask good questions. You know, same thing with the NBA, same thing with Major League Baseball, same thing with hockey. You have to take that time to become comfortable with it. And so I think when I first moved down here, it was all very hectic. It was all very crazy. It feels like it all happened very quickly because I interviewed for the job. A couple of months went by, and it took a while before I found out that I got it. And so when I did find out, it was a matter of maybe even less than a month that I kind of tied up, you know, all of my loose ends in Jacksonville, found a place down in South Florida, moved down, got settled in. Spring training had already started. So I just started going to spring training every day to get to know players, to get comfortable in the clubhouse, to kind of introduce myself to everyone before we took off in less than a month to start traveling together, being around each other all the time. So I think with anything, there's always kind of that transition period, whether you feel comfortable with your level of knowledge or not. And so with baseball, it was, like I just mentioned, it was talking to almost every player one-on-one, studying up on guys and their history, you know, whether they had played college baseball, whether they had just been drafted straight out of high school, who were teams that they had previously played for before coming to the Marlins, what position not only did they start in, but did they also have a background in playing? You know, lots of different things. And the same thing for hockey. But I think if you care deeply about what you do, if you're passionate about what you do, then you prepare passionately. You know, the thing I always say is that trust and respect from players, from coaches, from fan bases is earned. It's not automatically given. And I always approach it that way. And, you know, these athletes aren't doing the minimum to prepare for a game. So why would I do the minimum to prepare for covering them in a game? So I think it was all about just really throwing myself into it and just eating, sleeping, breathing baseball, eating, sleeping, breathing hockey, and just using the time that I had in the very beginning to show these players I was serious about wanting to do a good job.
And I think that you hit the nail on the head, because with a lot of, especially women in sports media, what fans see is the final product. They don't see all the legwork or the research that goes into every single piece of content that you produce. Is there a particular sport that's been more challenging in that regard, or how, is it always, you know, or is it typically the same sort of work mindset?
It's funny because hockey players have been the easiest to cover. They are so much fun. They're awesome. Like, it's such a blue collar feel to the sport. Whatever you need, they're on board with. They're so cool about it. They're always willing to talk. Like, it's so easy with them. But hockey, I feel like, has been the most challenging when it comes to my depth of knowledge of the game. And I don't even think hockey is a very complicated sport compared to, you know, you think about the NFL, and when you're breaking down single high safety versus cover two, there's so many defensive packages just within those two aspects of defense. And I mean, there's so many different things with like NFL or strategy in baseball or NBA, in basketball, whether you're playing zone defense, man to man, I mean, just so many different things. But hockey is the one where I've really, really had to work at learning how to ask good questions.
The culture too, I think is so just historic, and there's I think there's a lot of tradition in hockey that I think a lot of like casual fans might not know.
And when I walked into the Panthers dressing room, it had players like Jaromir Jagr. And I didn't want to make a fool of myself in front of Jaromir Jagr. I never want to embarrass myself. I never want it to look like I didn't prepare. And I don't think with hockey, it wasn't that I wasn't preparing. It took me a while to figure out how to ask a good hockey question, if that makes sense. Whereas I think football and, basketball, we kind of grow up on those sports in Florida, especially college football, which is so big in North Florida. So you feel, I think, automatically a little bit more comfortable with those because they're such traditional sports, especially down in the South.
Sure.
But hockey is not by any means the number one sport outside of, Canada, maybe New England area, Minnesota, places like that. So I think hockey was the one where it kind of took the biggest window of time before I became really comfortable with the questions I was asking and things like that.
Now you mentioned your travel schedule, and you travel with the teams for the Marlins and the Panthers, I believe.
Panthers, I just work home games, but I travel for every road trip for baseball.
How do you manage the schedule when both of those leagues are in session at the same time?
Oh man, the month of March, I just don't sleep. I think there was a week this past March where Monday I was at a hockey game, Tuesday I was at spring training, Wednesday I was at a hockey game, Thursday I was at spring training. And what's so crazy is hockey's at night, but spring training, the clubhouse opens at like 7:00 in the morning. And it's up in Jupiter, which is about an hour north of me. So I would get home from a Panthers game at, 10:30, 11:00 at night, try and fall asleep, even though I'm still wired because the alarm is going off at 5 a.m. the next morning. So yeah, it's definitely, there's only 2 times of the year where it really crosses over a lot. And that's, of course, in March when hockey's winding down and spring training is going on. And then late September where baseball is winding down, but hockey, practices and preseason is kicking up in full gear. So, but it's those days where I remind myself to just take it all in because every day, and I say this all the time, every day that I get to live my dream, no matter how exhausting it is, no matter how stressed out I am, no matter how busy my schedule is, it's a good day,
Definitely.
I'm getting to do with my life exactly what I always wanted to do. And I will never complain about that.
Do you have a favorite place that you visited while working?
Oh, there's so many. For baseball, obviously, even though we only get to go to Boston once every couple of seasons, when we play the AL East, I love Fenway. I just think Fenway is so magical. Just such a magical ballpark. PNC Park in Pittsburgh, I know Frank will be happy that I mentioned that one, is just spectacular. It's gorgeous. Within the division, I love going to Citi Field. Mets fans are just so sassy and full of attitude, and they always give it to opposing teams. And so it's really fun to kind of watch that crowd team interaction.
Right.
AT&T Park in San Francisco is just so cool. Like the whole feel. They sing Lights by Journey during the 7th inning stretch. They dim the lights, like they start playing it. Everyone's singing along. It's just awesome. So yeah, I mean, there's so many places. Hockey, I haven't been to as many arenas just because I don't travel often with hockey unless, we're doing a show on a player and we're going to his hometown and it happens to line up with one of the arenas. So I've been to Detroit. I've been to Minnesota. I went to the arena in Vegas during the Stanley Cup Finals, but the team wasn't there. They were actually in Washington. but I got to watch a game on the big screen there, which was really cool.
Oh, I heard their pregame ceremonies are unmatched.
Awesome. Yeah. And everyone, it was just really cool to see the way that everyone rallied around that team and really just got so into hockey. And I mean, obviously what the Golden Knights were able to do was such an incredible sports story in general this year. So, but yeah, I mean, it's just so cool to be able to go around and see the different ballparks, see on occasion the different hockey arenas, and they're all unique in their own sense, but those are some of my favorites.
Now, you've been to a bunch of different ballparks. Food and baseball kind of are synonymous together. Oh, yeah. Do you have a favorite crazy baseball food that you've tried?
So I've tried a lot of different ones because we try and have fun with that on our broadcast. But the craziest one I've ever tried is probably the churro dog in Phoenix. That the Diamondbacks offer. It's like 3,000 calories. It's a churro that's covered in whipped cream and caramel and chocolate and ice cream. And it's surrounded, like the churro looks like the hot dog. And then the bun is like the donut bun. It's
so there's no actual hot dog in it.
Hot dog.
That's good.
It's called the churro hot dog. Like the churro is the actual hot dog part. That I took one bite of, and I was like, if I finish this, I may literally be dead. Like my
diabetic coma.
Like my heart will be like, why have you done this to me? That wasn't very nice of you. But the best like ballpark food that I've ever had was probably in Milwaukee. They had like a homemade custard that they put on top of a homemade donut. They covered it in Nutella and whipped cream and sprinkled it with peanuts.
Jesus.
And oh my gosh, it was like, I still dream about it to this day. It was phenomenal.
I mean, you literally just took the words out of my mouth. Like I'm thinking about it. I'm like, dang, I'm hungry. And it's about time for dinner.
Philadelphia, Citizens Bank Park in Philadelphia, to me, I think actually has the best overall concessions because you can get Chicky and Pete's crab fries, which I think ultimately are just really crispy fries, like doused in Old Bay seasoning, but they're awesome. You can get, of course, a Philly cheesesteak from Gino's or Tony Luke's. They have Federal donuts, which they cook the fried chicken in the same oil as the donuts and vice versa, so that it's got like that salty sweet combination. So yeah, you can pack on some pounds with how often we go up to Philadelphia and obviously play the Phillies. But yeah, Citizens Bank Park, like I have to be very, very disciplined when I'm walking the concourse because everything just looks so good.
So switching gears a little bit to more of like, I guess the industry-wide topics that we have. So you're preparing for game day, you're walking out the door. What's in your sports media bag?
My clipboard, which has all of my notes, and I'm super old school. I write everything out, like handwrite everything, because if I handwrite it, it's like just automatically in my head. So, it's funny. I actually have my sports bag like right next to me. So I've got, here's the clipboard with my scorecard actually from last night's game.
Oh, old school. Love it.
Yeah, between the Marlins and the Cardinals.
Nice.
So my clipboard is of the utmost importance. I've got my makeup bag, obviously, because high definition cameras can be very unforgiving and a girl needs a touch up every once in a while. My IFB earpiece, so I can listen during the broadcast. Pencils, pens, highlighters, and whiteout because I hate scratch outs. They stress me out if I have like any type of scratch out on my notes. And then bottle of water, and I'm usually pretty good to go with just that.
Now, obviously, when you work in sports media, particularly for women, and you're in front of the camera, looks are pretty important. Do you have sort of a go-to hack to manage the hair, the makeup, and the outfit?
A go-to hack.
Because by the end of the day, in Florida heat, Probably gonna be sweating it all off.
Well, the good thing, that is the one thing that I'm so thankful about for Marlins Park is we have a roof and air.
Oh, that's true.
But I have definitely worked games in, you know, St. Louis in July or Philadelphia and Atlanta in August or whatever it may be, where I am just sweating my face off and I'm sweating and then I'm reapplying makeup and then I'm sweating again and I'm reapplying makeup and it's just a disaster. I guess like makeup wise, if you have like a really good setting spray, that definitely helps. Setting spray is critical. Hair wise, I'll curl it like this usually. And if it just gets too crazy, throw it up in a ponytail. And then outfit wise, I'll wear black a lot, which people are probably like, why are you wearing black when it's so hot outside? And I'm like, because black doesn't show the sweat.
That's very true. Very true. Wear black and a ball cap.
Yeah. If you ever see me on camera and I'm wearing black and it's really hot outside, then you can put two and two together and know why. But at the end of the day, like I always hope, you know, that, yeah, you want to look nice and that's great. You feel more confident when you feel pretty, but I've always wanted the quality of my work and the stories that I do and the interviews. Like I've always wanted that to speak way more than what I look like on camera. So
definitely.
I don't stress out too much if I'm, you know, sweating in the middle of a ball game, because I think people understand that's just part of life and it's going to happen.
Whew, I was at a Jaguars game last year and I wore a teal dress and the sweat was showing and it was not cute.
Oh, that
it was
used to happen to me at Jaguars training camp all the time, where I would come back to the radio station and walk in and still have sweat stains on my back from like leaning against the seat in my car, and it didn't dry out yet because that's how hot you were. Like, you never wear gray. Gray is the worst color in the world for anything because number one, it completely betrays you when you're sweating. But yeah, I've like narrowed down, okay, these are winter colors. These are the summer colors. Nice. That will keep your secrets for you.
And it's probably flip-flop. Like you're probably wearing the bright colors in wintertime and then wearing the dark colors in like spring and summer.
Totally.
So getting back to, I guess, you know, more of like the, you know, the work day experience, do you have a particular situation that maybe was really challenging for you over the course of your career, and how did you overcome it?
I think the most challenging situations are really probably in the beginning when you're still a little unsure of yourself, when you're walking into a new locker room or clubhouse or whatever it may be, and you're still trying to feel out, like, balancing being yourself with balancing like being professional and having knowledge of the game, but like still wanting to show people what your personality is all about. Like just kind of striking that balance of really showing who you are without being fake about it. And I think that was one of the things that I'm most grateful for when it came to the Marlins and the Panthers. And when I first walked in, the guys never made me feel like an outsider. You know, I do think with certain players, like it took longer to kind of earn their trust, but they never made me feel like I wasn't a part of it. So I was able to be myself very early on. And I think that helped tremendously for building relationships. And so, yeah, I think just kind of the challenges you face are maybe sometimes it just does take a little bit longer to earn trust and credibility. I think when a man walks into a male-dominated environment, you just see him as a reporter first and a man second, because that's what you're used to. But I think a lot of times when women or a woman walks into a new environment, you're not seen as a reporter first, you're seen as a woman first. And it just takes time to go from like someone looking at you and thinking she's a woman to just looking at you and thinking she's a reporter that just happens to be a woman. Does that make sense?
It does. And it kind of leads me to my next question, where traditionally and historically, women in sports media are given the sideline role or the toss it to news girl. So how do you sort of, I guess, toe that line of giving your perspective and your opinion in sports versus just giving the news?
Yeah, I think that a big part of what I try and do is weigh in on topics that I feel comfortable, but I never try and set myself up as an analyst because I'm not an analyst. You know, I never played the game. I never stood in the box and faced a 99-mile-per-hour fastball. So I really can't speak to what that's like or break down a guy's swing facing that kind of pitch. So when it comes to like telling stories, I think I rely a lot on what players tell me, but I have to get that stuff by coming up with good questions for them, you know? So I think the journalist part of me comes out a lot in the questions that I ask. And then I let what the players have tell me be kind of the meat of the story. Like, so I'm not setting myself up to be an expert. I'm more telling the story of the information that has been relayed to me.
I would imagine that sometimes comes across as an opinion, and maybe, you know, there's probably a lot of people that don't necessarily agree with women working in sports or women having an opinion in sports or perceived opinion in sports. So how do you sort of navigate through the Twitter trolls of the world?
Well, I think that I learned a long time ago that I just refuse to let other people determine how I feel about myself in this business. I'll never forget, I've told this story before, I'll never forget after I worked my first NBA game, the next day there was a whole discussion board on whether people thought I was pretty or not. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, like, this isn't even about the quality of my work. This is about what I physically look like, which has nothing to do with my reporting. So I think very early on in my career, I tried to make a conscious decision that whether positive or negative, I wasn't going to let outside opinion impact the way I felt about myself. Because if you do that, especially as a woman, right? Like, we're going to be riding this constant roller coaster of emotions. Like, if people love you this day, you feel good about yourself. If the next day you see a negative comment on Twitter, then you're going to feel bad about yourself. No, I just refuse to play that game. If you don't like me, you don't like me. And I just have to deal with that and remind myself that there's yet to be a person that's ever walked the face of this planet who has been universally liked. But I do genuinely appreciate the positive comments and people who take time out of their day to pay you a compliment. I try and respond to them. And if I can't respond to them, then I at least look and read every single one of them. And I think that's one thing that I've also been very lucky with moving down to South Florida. I followed someone in my position who was very popular. I think everyone knows, you know, Allison Williams, who does so much stuff now for ESPN, and she is just killing it. And she is awesome. Like, I see her all the time when we go out to the West Coast. And she is just awesome. Like, it's so easy to see why she was so well liked, but it's tough following someone who is well liked. You know, it's not an easy thing to do. And so that's one thing I'm very thankful for, is that Marlins fans, Panther fans, they have been so gracious to me, and they've been welcoming and so positive. And I mean, for every, you know, quote unquote negative comment that I see 1,000 kind ones. And so I just refuse to waste my energy on people who have nothing better to do than be negative on a social media outlet, because at the end of the day, if someone's going to do that, they're ultimately the ones that have a problem,
Mm-hmm.
not me.
And they're never going to say it to your face either. They're going to hide behind a
like
keyboard.
They probably see you and say to your face, "Oh my God, I think you're amazing." Like,
can I take a picture?
Yeah, exactly. So I just, if you have enough time, like there are so many bigger things in this world to worry about. If you have enough time to use social media to say mean things or bully people, like you're the one that's really got to figure out your issues at the end of the day. I'm not going to spend my time.
Right. Like, get a hobby. You don't have time for that. Yeah, literally, you don't have time for it.
Exactly.
Do you have, over the course of your career, sort of the biggest, I guess, pinch yourself moment?
Yes. The first one that comes to my mind is the first game that I got to work the sidelines at Fenway. When I actually walked out onto the field rather than just walked into Fenway and took my seat in the crowd. And I was standing there and I was looking around and just thinking to myself, just a couple of years ago, I was here at this ballpark watching a game, sitting in the stands and, never even realizing that in a few years, I wouldn't be the one sitting in the stands. I'd be the one down on the field talking about the game. And that was my first season of baseball as well. We actually played the AL East my first season. So I got to go to Boston and Fenway my first year covering baseball. So I think that moment, just walking out, and I think it also, knowing how cool that was for my parents, especially my dad, who had grown up such a hardcore Red Sox fan, to know that, maybe the way he puts it, maybe he never had any sons who could get drafted and go play in the big leagues, but one of his kids gets to kind of be in the big leagues. And so I think that was really cool too, to think of it from that perspective. Like, not only is it awesome to be here at Fenway, not only is it awesome to live my dreams, but I know how much my parents sacrificed to make sure that I could be in a position to do what I'm doing. So I think it was also that kind of pinch me moment of, I feel like at the end of the day, this is a moment that my parents can share into and be really proud of.
Nice. That's a really great story. Do you have, I guess, sort of a woman in the past or even now, or women that work in the industry that you sort of idolize?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. When I started working for ESPN, Erin Andrews was still, the sideline reporter for the two shows that I worked on. And at the time, she was obviously, the biggest name as far as females and sideline reporters go. And, I'll never forget, there was one night where I ran into her at the hotel we were all staying in, and she sat with me in the lobby for like 45 minutes, encouraging me to go follow my dream of being on camera. And when I did finally get my first on camera job, I was still working at ESPN. I was kind of balancing both because I was only working a handful of games on camera. She bought me a $75 gift card to Sephora to go buy like on camera makeup. And She wrote me like a really nice card. Like, and so, yeah, like I definitely think, in the very beginning, when I first started out, A, because I was around Erin all the time, and B, because she was such a huge deal, that was definitely one for me. I think my all-time favorite, like, female announcer, reporter, host, though, is Doris Burke. I think Doris Burke, I don't care what anyone wants to say, Doris Burke, hands down, to me, is the greatest female in our industry. Like, I'm with Drake, like the GOAT.
She has been. You are the four out of four have mentioned Doris Burke today.
And the thing that I love so much about Doris Burke is she is so versatile. She can do anything. She can do the sidelines. She can host. She can do color commentary. She can be the analyst. She can call the game. I mean, she can do anything. And another thing that I love so much about her is you can tell the level of respect that players have for her. They call her by name. They give her great answers. Greg Popovich, who is terrifying, I mean, respects her. Like, you see it. You see it, the way the guys speak to her, the way that they treat her, the way that they interact with her. And I think she is just awesome. Awesome.
Do you have I guess, a stereotype for women working in sports that you just absolutely hate?
I hate the stereotype that people just assume that reporters hook up with athletes all the time. Um, I hate the stereotype that we're more concerned about what we look like on camera than the quality of our reporting. I think those are probably the first two that come to mind. Yeah, because I think, there are so many women who got to where they are on a very integrity-filled road. And I don't think that should just be, discounted in any way, shape, or form. So, yeah, I think to me that's probably the biggest one.
Do you have a piece of advice that your future self would give to your past self?
Oh man, there's so many things that I've learned. Okay, some of the biggest ones that stand out to me. Appreciate the journey. Appreciate the season of life that you're in. Not, what season of sport that you're in, but what season of life that you're in, because you don't want to miss it. You don't want to look back and be like, gosh, that could have been such an awesome part of my life. Even though maybe I wasn't doing exactly what I wanted to be doing at the time. Like, every season serves its purpose and usually prepares you for the next step in life. So, just enjoy where you are. Don't be in such a rush to get to the next thing that you miss what you're currently doing. I think a big thing that I tell a lot of people, say thank you. Appreciate everyone who has helped you get to where you are. Appreciate people on your crew. Appreciate fans. Appreciate, players that make your job easy. Just say thank you, and don't just say it once. Constantly say it. Constantly let people know how much you appreciate what they do for you. I think another thing is truly learn the art of listening. Very early on in my career, I was always so nervous when I went on camera that I would do an interview and automatically forget like what a player told me. Like 10 seconds after the interview, someone would be like, "Oh, what did Dwight Howard say to you in that interview?" And I'd be like, "I have no idea." I have no clue, because I was so nervous and already thinking about my next question that I didn't really take the time to truly listen. And even just listening to the broadcast as it's being called, I think that one of my strengths that I've gotten so much better at is interviews and just being comfortable to listen to player responses and try and play off of that rather than being so set on getting to my next question that I don't take the time to just have a conversation rather than do an interview. But listening in more ways than one, not just listening when you're doing interviews, but I listen to my announcers call a game. And that's where I get a lot of questions from. What are the guys talking about in the booth? What is our analyst talking about when it comes to a guy's swing, or the way a pitcher is throwing the ball that night, or the power play and how it's working, or, whatever defense a basketball team is employing that night. You can learn so much just from listening to the guys in the booth call a game. So I think that's the biggest thing. Learn truly the art of listening.
You mentioned
it's not as simple as you would think.
No, it's not, especially when you're thinking of your current question, you're trying to go for the segue to the next question, and you got to still be listening at the same time.
Totally.
It's definitely a juggling act. But you mentioned fans earlier. What's one thing that you wish that fans knew about your job?
I think you kind of hit on it very early on, the amount of preparation that goes into it. You're not just showing up to a ball game that has a 7:10 first pitch at 6:00 and winging it to go on the air. I mean, you're at the ballpark at 3:00 in the afternoon. You're going in the clubhouse and talking to players. You're talking to the manager, you're in the production truck editing with your editor, like what pieces you want to put together. There's so many things that go into it. And especially baseball season, because it is every day, like you're constantly acquiring more knowledge, especially like teams that you play in your division when you know you're going to see them so many times throughout the course of the year. I have stories from when we played the Phillies for the very first road trip that I could, try and bring back later on in the year. But so you're prepping for games all year long. Like even during the off season, if I see a good story, I'll make a note of it. Like I have this email that I just put story ideas in throughout the course of the off season. Like Mookie Betts bowled a 300 at a charity event during the off season for the Red Sox. So I wrote in my little story idea email, Mookie Betts, not just a great baseball player, great bowler too. So it's just something fun that I can do when we play the Red Sox. Like, it's just so many different things like that. It's a constant process of preparation. During the hockey season, going to practice on an off day, not just being there for a game day, but putting in the time to be
putting in the work.
Yeah. So I think that's the biggest thing is I wish, fans, and I think most fans do understand and appreciate it, but I think fans who maybe are a little bit more critical, I wish they knew how much work you really put into it and how much of your heart and soul you put into it. And when you make a mistake, it kills you more than it kills anyone else. Like I can work a game and do 5 stories and 4 of them were just, home runs, like nailed them, crushed them. And then I'll have one story where I stumbled over a word or I messed up a pronunciation or this or that. I'm not going home concentrating on the 4 stories that I killed. I'm going home spending the entire car ride thinking about the one that I screwed up. Like, so I think, I am my harshest critic. And on occasion, like if you make a mistake, someone will point it out to you on social media or something like that. And I just want to be like, thanks, but I didn't need it. Like I'm already thinking about it way more. Like you're going to forget about it. And 5 years from now, I'm still going to remember that mistake that I made. You know what I mean?
So if you obviously, the women's roles within sports continues to grow as more and more women enter the field and enter a variety of different positions within the industry. What's one piece of advice that you would give to a young woman that's looking to get into sports media?
Figure out a way to, figure out a way to set yourself apart, whether it's being that person that's willing to work that much harder, whether it's having a unique style, whatever it may be, figure out a way to set yourself apart because there's so many women in the industry nowadays. You don't want to go in trying to be somebody else. You don't want to go into an interview thinking, I'm going to do this just the way that Doris Burke would do it. I'm going to do this the way that Jessica Mendoza or Sam Ponder or Laura Rutledge or whoever. Don't do it the way they do it. Do it the way you're going to do it. Because at the end of the day, you can only be yourself. You can't be somebody else. And that's kind of the cool thing about it. You're only you.
Right.
And then I think the second thing is, however you get into the business, however you break through that door, because a lot of people will say, oh yeah, your looks will get you in the door. Well, your looks may get you in the door, but it's your work ethic. It's your preparation.
Bingo.
It's your relationships with players, carrying yourself professionally. That's the stuff that's going to keep you there at the end of the day. So, and I think that all just comes back down to working hard. So yeah, find a way to set yourself apart just really by being yourself at the end of the day, and don't ever take your foot off the brake when it comes to hard work and preparation, or don't ever take your foot off the gas.
Yeah, I think that's that.
There we go. Don't ever take your foot off the brake. Then you're like completely completely going in first. So
and it's 100 miles an hour all the time.
Don't listen to that piece of advice. Keep your foot on the gas pedal.
Well, Jessica, I think that's a perfect way to end this. Thank you so much for joining us, and in the coming months, whenever before the issue drops in September, where can people follow you? Where can people find more of your work?
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Twitter is at Jess Blaylock, JessBlaylock, and Instagram is at Jess L. Blaylock.
You're back on Instagram. That's a good thing to hear.
You know what? I don't know if I ever left. I just never really posted a lot. And if I did post, it was usually pictures of
who have been very good. The dogs have been very good during the interview.
Chester, and then there's Lemon. So yeah, I literally think my Instagram description of myself is I post a lot of pictures of my dogs. Feel free to judge. So yeah, I'm trying to be better with Instagram. I really am. But I guess I mainly use Twitter when it comes to social media to function. So
it is the world we live in.
Seriously.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And for those who might be just tuning in, be sure to catch or pick up the issue of Void the Mag. Their sports issue drops September 1st. And for more work, be sure to follow Jessica Blaylock, because obviously she hit this interview out of the park. So she does great work. I miss working with you too.
Yeah, well, you know what? All I'm going to do is spend the next 5 hours thinking about how I told people to keep their foot on the brake instead of the gas. No,
take your own advice. Don't harp on it. All right. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hopefully you enjoyed that interview with Jessica. And if you're not already, be sure to subscribe to the Guys Girl Media podcast and YouTube channel so you don't miss any of our football season content, along with some bonus material all throughout the season, including more interviews like this. Until next time, this is your girl Blythe signing off.